Now, East Germany. For 45 years, Germany had been a divided country. In fact, in 1982 or thereabouts, or maybe it was 86, Ronald Reagan visited the Soviet Union. Had to have been 86. And he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Gorbachev didn't tear it down right then, but by 1989, 1990, thereabouts, the Berlin Wall came down. Today, there are pieces of it left as a souvenir. But the city of Berlin united, and East and West Germany united, became one nation, and they united free from communism. Again, the Russians were powerless and helpless to do anything about it because the whole Soviet empire was just crumbling, and the satellite states also were leaving. So the 15 other republics all left Russia. The satellite nations, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, all of them left Russia also. Now, Germany promised the world when it united, once again, East and West united, said, we'll not try to take back the land that Poland took from us at the end of World War II. And to this day, they've kept their promise. They respect the boundaries. So Germany is now united, but it's smaller than it was before World War II. Again, your book shows a map on page 802 of the 16 republics that broke off: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Macedonia, Chechnya, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkestan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. Some of these other names I'm not going to try to attempt to pronounce. If any of you know how to pronounce them, you're welcome to it. Anyway, they all broke off from the Soviet Union. The satellite nations broke off also. And the Cold War was over. Now, I say the Cold War was over. That was true, folk, until about a couple of months ago. It looks like the Cold War is now starting to rev up again. And the weak, seemingly very weak and inept Soviet Union is now replaced by Russia, and Russia might not be as weak and inept as they once were some 22 years ago, 23, 24 years ago. Anyway, your book is talking about the collapse of the Soviet Union. Why did they collapse? They're saying a lot of the same things I've said. The real blame, the credit doesn't go to Ronald Reagan. The credit doesn't go to Pope John Paul II. The real blame for the Soviet collapse goes to its own leaders: Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Andropov, all these men who simply saw that the Soviet Union had problems and refused to deal with them. Mikhail Gorbachev tried reforms, but by then it was too late. The Soviet Union fell from within. Your book also points out that the Soviet Union had been very multi-ethnic in character. Only half the total population were ethnic Russians. The rest of them were minorities, and your book doesn't say it, but I've heard that the minorities were mostly Muslim. And these countries, particularly the ones with the name of Stan, Kazakhstan and Turkestan, Uzbekistan, among others, these were primarily Muslim countries, and they were wanting their independence and felt like they could no longer be part of an empire like the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union just simply overextended itself. What your book calls imperial overreach. Anything that gets so large becomes unstable and eventually begins to fall apart. That's true of human institutions, true of life in general. All right, well, we got the Soviet Union broken up and all of its satellites having gone their separate ways. Now, East, China. China had been at war for 12 years, but by the fall of 1949, China was at peace with Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party on top. So, did I say Ho Chi Minh? Oh my bad. Mao Zedong. It's Mao Zedong, not Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. Mao Zedong and the Communist Party were on top. All right, anyway. Hey, if you see me in a mistake like that, feel free to correct it. I mean, I do make them sometimes, big time. All right. Mao Zedong called his experiment a new democracy, and it started off with him taking land from the wealthy and redistributing this land among the poor. And he gave a lot of acreage of land to poorer farmers. Now, we talked a few weeks ago, you may have forgotten about it, but we talked about a nation in the West that did that, namely Mexico. Mexico, between the wars, gave a lot of land to farmers. And folk, it sounds like it's a great idea. I mean, hey, take this land from the rich and redistribute it among the poor. And everywhere where it's been tried, it has not worked. The ancient Greek philosopher Solon, the philosopher ruler Solon who ruled Athens, knew it wouldn't work, and he resisted all attempts to do that, and it goes down to his credit. But Mao Zedong gave a bunch of land to the poor. A lot of your land, a lot of your peasants were grateful. The economy began to rebound, but the population grew at a very rapid rate, and there were millions of people who seemed to not benefit, who were left out. Another problem they had, they over-farmed the land until where your book says that about 1/4 the land that had been arable. That word arable means capable of being farmed. Anyway, about 1/4 the land had been arable, all of a sudden was incapable of being farmed. And the result was, yes?
So arable means capable?
Capable of being farmed. It was good land for farming. And, well, eventually Mao went through what he had wanted to do in the first place, collectivize the farms. In other words, collective farms means that nobody, well, the community owns the land. So everybody in the community rises up in the morning, gets out, and they all take their turns working the land, and they work until harvest time. And at harvest time, they all collectively harvest the land. All the food, produce goes to the collective bin, and then it's redistributed to everybody as he needs it. Notice what Mark said, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Now, folk, every time this has been tried, no matter who has tried it, everywhere where it's been tried, it has inevitably failed. And China was no exception. The person who worked hard got no more than the lazy person who had shirked like crazy. Incentive to work hard was taken away. The result was, at least your book says 15 million, I've read as many as 25 million starved to death. Mao Zedong responded by giving forth what he called a great leap forward. In other words, instead of, he took the collectives and made them into more. In other words, like here's a group of collectives. Well, he united all these collectives into one big collective in his great leap forward, thinking that if we could just increase the size of the collective farms, it would work better. And the result was more people starved than ever. Again, there was no incentive. I mean, why work if you're going to be fed anyway, whether you work or not? Why work? So a lot of the people simply shirked. And poverty was greatly increased. Well, oh yes, something I must say about Chinese farming. In our country, if you think of a farm, you probably think of a tractor and farm machinery. A tractor pulls a plow and pulls a reaper. Chinese cannot easily farm with tractors. I don't want to say there are no tractors in China, but basically they grow, the main crop is rice. You cannot grow rice with tractors. I mean, you have to grow the rice by building up rice paddies. And there was areas that will hold water. And then planting the rice plants inside the water and covering up with water, and the rice paddies grow outside of the water. It's very difficult work, and it calls for people wading in water knee deep and working the plants, which are maybe 10 to 15 inches underwater. And again, this kind of work can't be done by tractors. Problem is, as their population increased and their available land for farming became less, they were starving. They began to think that, hey, what we need is fewer people. So they finally began to try to control the population. Now, Mao had been a typical communist at first. He said that what Chinese women need to do is populate the country like crazy, and let's get more people. And then as China got more people and the people began starving to death, he said, no, wait, maybe what we need is fewer people. So he passed a law that Chinese families can only have one child. Well, the Chinese had a custom that only the male child could carry on the family name, and only the man could inherit the property. So what they wound up doing was couples who had a female child would secretly kill their baby. And this was to go on for several years. And in fact, I've heard that your book says to some extent in some places it still goes on. With the result that a bunch of Chinese, a generation of Chinese grew up where the men greatly outnumbered the women. And a lot of these men said they could not find wives. And the Chinese didn't seem to think that, hey, if they didn't produce female babies, they weren't going to have anybody to carry on the family name anyway. So, the Great Leap Forward, you can call it a disaster. The communes, now I want to say about communes, the only type of people who have ever been able to get communes to work are primitive people like I'm going to pick on the American Indians, who get a village that consists of no more than 200 or 300 people, and they're all related by family, and they can sometimes at least get it to work a little bit. But they don't form nation states. Well, the problem with that is, eventually some foreign group comes in and drives them out or hauls off a bunch of them as slaves, because these people never advance technologically or socially. Advanced people can form themselves into nations, big nations that consist of millions of people. The American Indians simply were never able to get together any more than a few hundred people. Now, there was one time in 1877 where 2,000 or 3,000 of them happened to get together, and they wiped out General Custer in what's called Custer's Last Stand. So what they do to celebrate their victory, got into a quarrel among themselves and split off in several different directions, splintered. But they had about 3,000 or 4,000 of them together one time, and they whipped an American army. If they had remained united, but that's one of those what-ifs. As it was, China was trying to remain a nation of communes, and as your book says, they were a disaster.